Welcome to Psychology Hub with Dr. Rodriguez. In today's video, we're going to be reviewing the stages of classical conditioning. Okay, it's within the principles of classical conditioning, but I'm going to create an activity. Okay, so you're going to need some material, either 4 sheets of paper or 4 cue cards and a pen, pencil, something to write with. Okay, take your piece of paper or your cue card, and I want you to write 3 lines, just about an inch across, a few lines. Creating 1, 2, 3, 4 columns. Okay, we're going to need these 4 columns. Once you do that, I want you to add on that stages of classical conditioning. Remember the 1, 2, 3, 4 columns? I want you to add the stages of classical conditioning. Alrighty, third, I want you to go ahead and now we're going to label each column. Okay, the first one is going to be food. Label the first column with the title of food that represents this, right? C-U-E in the second column, the term pair in the third column, and learned in the fourth column. Okay, ready? Push pause if you have to, create your little cue card, and then hit play. You're ready. Alrighty, now the fourth illustration to our little activity, I want you to now complete a little bit more in each column. So the first column, go ahead and write US for the food. It's an unconditioned stimulus, which is food, right? In the same column right next to it, I want you to write UR. That's the unconditioned response, which is salivation. Remember, food creates the response of salivation. In the second column, I want you to write whistle, which is the NS, the neutral stimulus, and next to it put no salivation, because just because you whistle don't mean you're getting a response, right? Ready. And in your third column, I want you to write whistle, put whistle before the food. Remember, whistle before the food results in salivation. That's a conditioned response. Okay, remember, the pairing occurs when you present the whistle right before the food, which is the neutral stimulus, and the unconditioned stimulus. Once you present them together, you pair them, third column, you get salivation, which is a conditioned response. Okay, now to end, in your fourth column, you see the fourth column over here, your fourth column that you have labeled as learned, I want you to write whistle, which is a conditioned stimulus, and then underneath it I want you to write salivation, which is a conditioned response. Okay, that is learned. So right there, you just did the stages of classical conditioning. Okay, and one more thing before we end this activity, I really want to place emphasis on, while you did that illustration, you did the stages of classical conditioning, you did the 4 columns, 3 lines, created 4 columns, you labeled it food, cue, pair, learned, you put the unconditioned stimulus, the unconditioned response, the neutral stimulus, and then you put where there was no salivation from the whistle, and then what was learned, you put in there the conditioned stimulus resulted in a conditioned response. Okay, when you do that, I want you to just create a couple lines down here. So when you're moving forward with the test or the next question, you'll have space to write out another question. Oftentimes, when you get a question, if you're going to take a test in psychology or a quiz, oftentimes they're going to give you questions that start in this column. 1, 2, 3, 4. Sometimes you're going to get a question that starts in the 4th column and it's going to go backwards. Remember, forward conditioning, backwards conditioning. So some of the questions are going to start somewhere within. So it is a good idea for you to understand the stages of classical conditioning, and they really understand the diagram, all right, and the stages. So when you're asked a question, you can kind of already immediately understand what area, what stage, and get the question correct, right? Let's try one or two questions really quick, okay? These questions will allow us to not just go from stage 1, 2, 3, 4 like we wish tests would do. They're going to kind of just throw us in one of these sections and kind of have us understand the stages, okay? Here's the first question. So let's say we're repeatedly brings about, guys, we repeatedly ring a bell immediately before presenting the food. What stage are we at? That's column 3, right? You see where it says the whistle before the food? The whistle before the food, that's where we're at. So when we get a question like that, we want to make sure we know we start here, okay? That doesn't mean that's the answer. That just gives us a mental or a visual as to where we start within the stage, okay? Listen to this. The second part of this question reads, after several trials, the dog salivates upon hearing the bell alone. What column are we at? The fourth column, learned, right? It would be the conditioned stimulus. The dog learned, it got conditioned, right? All right, here's the second question. Remember the 4 stages, right? What sequence? What is the sequence that describes the acquisition phase of classical conditioning? Okay, remember we have the, unfortunately, they're not, sometimes the questions are not going to give us the food, the terms food, salivation, the whistle. They're going to use the US, the UR, the NS. So when you write out this diagram, you go ahead and you lay out the diagram to follow, okay? All you have to do is replace certain different neutral stimuli or neutral stimulus or what the unconditioned response is, because it's not always salivation, okay? Just be mindful of that. Now to answer the question, it's going to be the conditioned stimulus plus the unconditioned stimulus resulted in the unconditioned response, okay? So the sequence that describes the acquisition phase of classical conditioning would be the CS, the conditioned stimulus, third column, the conditioned stimulus with the unconditioned stimulus results in learning, right? Column 3, it started there and we followed it and there's our answer, okay? Good luck.